Checked. All right. I like these new little windscreens. Psh, 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 psh. I like it. That wasn't even intentional. It's subliminal or something. All right. Sweet. Thanks for everyone for showing up to PDX Sass. Considering like the 8 of us that were here when pizza came, I'm glad everyone decided to show up and we could polish off that pizza. There's probably maybe a little more, but not much. We also do have stickers. If you didn't have a chance to grab some, either PDX Sass or we also have some Treehouse stickers over there. Make sure you pick some of those up before you head out as well. I am Micah Godbolt. I lead up this crazy thing that you guys keep coming back to every month. I don't understand why, but you do, and I appreciate it. So we are PDX Sass. You can follow us on Twitter at PDX Sass. We've got a Google Plus group, bit.ly/PDX Sass. We record all of these, so don't say anything too stupid that you don't want your employer to know. Which also means you can go back to previous episodes or previous meetups and catch those as well. So youtube.com/PortlandSass. And as well to catch the invites for future events, we're at meetup.com/PDXSass. So PDX Sass, all the things. We are sponsored by Treehouse. We're excited to have Treehouse as a sponsor as they help provide us with stickers and meetup.com membership and pizza. So without them, we have no pizza in our bellies. So huge thanks for them. If you're not familiar with Treehouse, yes, claps. And also for Puppet for hosting this. They're awesome for doing that. So thank you, Puppet. If you're not familiar with Treehouse, Treehouse is an online learning center for basically all things web, whether you're trying to learn HTML and CSS or write Ruby apps or Android apps, and then they're basically into everything. They also just in the last couple of years moved their offices, or at least one of their main offices, to Portland, so they are local. They're also doing this great thing with what's it called, Code Oregon, is that what it's called? Something, yeah, Code Oregon. So they're just really getting involved in the Oregon space, and it's really awesome to have them sponsor us as well. If you are interested, you can get 1 free month of Treehouse at this lovely link here, trhou.se/PDXSass14, to check them out for a month. I took a Ruby course with them. I really enjoyed it. Really good sense of humor, a lot of fun, good like short 5-6 minute videos that kind of take you from not knowing anything to being pretty proficient. So certainly check that out. A couple other shameless plugs. I do a weekly podcast called Sass Bites. It's usually on Thursday. It's kind of moving around a little bit now, but it's usually at noon. But I'll tweet out about it at Sass Bites on Twitter. And you can catch previous episodes at youtube.com/SassBites. Recently, Sass 3.4, the pre-release alpha, just came out on GitHub. It's on GitHub, not even as a gem. So you have to download it and create a gem, install a gem from there. I got a chance to play around with it, and I just did an episode, actually this afternoon, talking about some of the cool stuff in that. So I'm sure I'll be probably sharing that at a meetup here in the future as well. So check that out as well. Good friend Stu Robson has a great newsletter called Sass News, which you can follow at Sass News, which just has all sorts of great links that come out every week about basically what's going on, people that are blogging and conferences and other ways to learn about Sass. So check all that stuff out as well. It's a great resource for all things Sass. So I'm going to, seriously, I like talking with this microphone, but I've got a lapel, so I'm going to switch to the lapel. And I'm going to talk about my talk. So one second. Check, check. Ooh, sweet. All right. Probably downstairs. It's a little hot. That would explain why there's a little weird echo. First, I had both of them on at the same time. So I'm going to go first since I'm up here. My laptop's already plugged in. And then we're going to have Jesse and Chris pop up afterwards. But let's go ahead and let's do this. This is still just a little bit ringing. I'll pull it down just a hair more. Sorry. Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today is a simple Sass style guide. The first conversation is why a style guide, especially one as simple as this? Well, what I've found in recent projects is that oftentimes you'll have all this code locked away in your Sass repo that the designers aren't seeing, that the stakeholders aren't seeing, and you're using terminology that might be completely different from them. If it sounds okay there, it's just weird echoey here. Oh well. So you're calling it one thing, they're calling it something else. There's this constant disconnect as far as like the names of colors or the names of like, I'm calling it main headline, they're calling it like top header or like second header or something like that. So oftentimes you have issues with people calling things different things, referring to things with different names, people coming onto a project and like, what are they talking about? And not be able to quickly understand like, oh, they're talking about the secondary header, the purple one. Now I understand. And the other thing is that, no, that was basically it. Yeah, is that people are just not able to really see what these things are, see what this actual color is within your code. So one of the things that a style guide does is it takes that out of your code and that gets that into something that's visual, gets that in something that you can actually share in a web browser with fellow developers and also designers, as stakeholders, anyone that needs to see this, that can see this primary color, this greenish color here, that's primary. When I talk about that green, blue, like, is this blue or green? Some people, like, way too many people call this thing blue. And it's like, no, it's green, or aqua, or something. It's like, no, this is primary. That's the primary color. So it gives everyone, like, one place to look to see what that color is, to be able to inspect it, see what the color is, to be able to call it by a name. So having this common language is really, really important. Because it also means that when someone asks you to change, I need you to change the blog title. All right, well, what do you mean by changing the blog title? Because that blog title, or the title is used in the blog, is also used on our About Us page, and it's also used on our video page. It's also used here and there and everywhere. So do you want me to change the main headline, or do you want me to actually change the blog title? Because those are two completely different things. One is maybe creating a new headline and applying it there, and the other one is changing the entire system. So again, it gives us a chance to kind of come back to this, like, this is the main headline. Do you want me to change that main headline? Because that's used in the blog and other places, and they can go, yes. I would like you to change it from the primary color to the secondary color. That right there is something you can actually, is an actionable story. Rather than, I need you to change the blog title to this other random color, is really, really kind of nebulous, because you don't exactly know what that means. I know I've run into that a lot. So anyway, that's simple style guide. You can go really crazy with style guides. It allows you to do lots more stuff. But what I want to do is show you, even if you have a pretty small project and you just want to get the stuff surfaced, there's some really, really cool tools that you can use in Sass to make that happen. So what I want to do is I want to show you this markup on the right. This markup on the right is actually all the markup that is driving my current style guide. And can you see it okay? Should I kick it up a little more? All right. Basically, it's div of style guide, and I've got two different divs. I've got a div with color and a div with extends. And then everything inside of it is just div, 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 div. In this case, I've got a div with a span in it. But you can see I've just got a bunch of these. And typically, I'll have like 100 of them or something like that. Because what's really helpful to do is to be able to update your style guide without having to go monkey around with all of the markup. The first style guides I did actually had like actual classes on every one of those. But every time I added a new color or added a new extend or new header, I would have to go to the markup and update the markup. And it was this big, long process to do that. So what I'm going to show you is a fun trick with Sass where all I have to do is have this, this HTML folder that has a ton of divs in it. And I'm just going to use nth child to be able to apply everything to it. So that means that I can go in and add colors, I can remove colors, I can change the names of colors, I can do all of that and not worry about having to go in and change that markup. So for instance, this primary color, if I actually want this to be green because people want, oops, I don't need to save on SassMeister. If I need to change it to green, I can just change the actual variable name, and you can see it changes here. If I want to change the color, I can actually change it there, and it's going to change here. So I don't need to go and change markup. I don't need to go and do anything. this is reflective of my actual code. So anytime I change my code, my style guide is going to not only take that color, but even the name of the variable. Not quite as easy with extends, but the same kind of concept applies. If I change it in my partial, like if I change this to main headline super, I need to go in here, I need to do it here too. And now it'll say main headline super. So all of this style guide is actually going to follow what my code is. And that's the real advantage of this. It's not some separate, like recreates all of your stuff. This is actually pulling directly off of your code. So that's what I'm going to show how to do today. And I'll tweet out this gist because there's a lot of code to it. I certainly don't expect you to be able to like just memorize all of it because I certainly cannot. So let me go ahead. I'm going to hide this for now so we can see this a little bit better. But let me walk through. Let me do the colors first because colors are a little bit simpler, and then the extends get a little more complicated. So what I've got here, I've got a site colors variable, which is a map. And if you're familiar with Sass 3.3, we can now do maps. So we can do associated arrays. So we've got primary is that green color, secondary is the bluer color, tertiary is something I now forget. So those are our colors. And obviously you can have as many as you want. If you want to add another one, pink is, of course, pink. You can do it just like that. And pink. Aha. All right. So that's our colors. So the way this works is that when we skip down to here, I've got some real basic styles on like doing 50% on each side, just some general presentation stuff to make it look a little prettier. But the meat and potatoes starts right here. So here's my colors. I can go a little bigger on that. How's that in the back? Okay. So here's my colors div. So I'm employing nth child. So nth child, I can say, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I just go down the row with that. And using Sass, I can get a little counter there, and I can just kind of increment that counter. So as you see what I'm doing here, in this case, I've got that little label of color at the top. So that nth child 1, I'll just call that, I'm going to extend the label, which is that black background and text treatment. So that's my label. And then I'm going to start my little counter. I've got an I of 1, and then I've got an each loop that's going to step through that map. So we've got our site colors right here. And right now there's 4 different colors in it. And in that map, there is a color, which is the key. So like the name of the color. And there's a value to that, which is the hex value. So we're just going to step through for each one of those and spit out some code. The first thing I do is I increment my I value, because that's going to be my nth child. So you can see div nth child, and I pass that I in there. So the first time it goes through, it's nth child of 2, because the first one I'm using for my label. And I give it a background of that the actual color that's coming from that map. I'm going to place right in there. I can throw in some padding, some font size, and a little bit of text shadow just to make it a little easier to see. And then I'm going to use the after pseudo element to actually insert the name of that color. So you can see in the content here, that color value gets placed in there. And I need to extrapolate it so that it actually spits out the actual value of it as text. So as you can see, what happens here is this div, and I'm not going to inspect it, but this div is this colors is the first div. That primary is div number 2, and it's got the background color of that green, and it's got a pseudo element with content of primary. So if I need to go in and I change this from primary to green, then it's just going to take that value, pop it in the pseudo element, and automatically gets placed in there. That's great because it means that you can change your variables without having to go in and actually, if you're extending a green class or something, you had class of green and that's how you're doing it, you wouldn't have to go in and change it from whatever primary to green every time you did that. Oh, that's not what I want. There we go. All right, back to normal. That's why you save your gists. So that's how it works with site colors. If you want to see any more of that, or does that make basic sense? If I gave you the code, you could easily replicate it. Cool. All right. So we're going to do the same thing with extends. Whoa. Let's see if I have map up and going. I don't. All right, let me get this going. let me give you a quick glimpse of our the current style guide that I'm working with for our project. Oh, here we go. There we are. All right. So as you can see on the left-hand side there, those are our extends. We've got a lot of extends. So in some cases, you're going to have a lot of these things, and it really helps to be able to say, oh, you know, I already have a title that's like this, so I can reuse this element. As you can see, this can get a pretty large amount of stuff in there. So with site extends, the idea is that you've got these extends, and an extend is a little block of code. In this case, it's the silent one, so it only prints out when you extend it. But here's our main headline, font size of 3, and then color, you know, brought from the color map. It's probably going to have other stuff as well. I just want to keep it simple here. So when you go along in your component, you're like, you know, title, extend, main headline, and those kind of things. You're using that throughout your site. Well, we want to do the same thing here, and we want to extend. So we want to take these divs and extend this main headline, secondary headline, and our feature and detail copy onto those elements. The problem here is, unfortunately, we can't put all this into a map. As much as I would love to be able to actually take a map of all my extends and then somehow iterate through them. And the problem is you can't programmatically create an extend. That's the crux of the problem. Otherwise, you could put all this in a map and then use like a function to process it all out in extends. But for now, what I need to do is I do need to duplicate this into a map. Fortunately, I can put it all in the same file, so I can keep it in sync a lot easier. So with this, what I'm doing is I've got the site extends as a variable, and I've got my first key is the name of headlines, because I'm going to have all these different sections, right? There's the same thing in this, where in the style guide, I've got hero headlines, section headlines, detail headlines, so all these different like groups of extends. So we want to be able to capture that and organize them a lot easier. So to do that, our key is actually going to be the name of the name of the group, and then inside of it, we're going to have a list of all the extends I want to use. Now in this first case, I'm just going to use a space delimited set of extends. And the cool thing about it, space delimited, is you can actually use carriage returns as a space. So this is actually a space right here, another extend. So, you know, I don't need a comma or an actual space. I can just put one after another, which is nice because it just makes it a lot easier to delete or copy or move or those kind of things. So that's what's going on with the headlines. On the copy, like text copy, what I've got something a little more complicated, because what I want to be able to do with copy is not just spit out the name of the copy. As you can see with the markup down here, I actually have copy with all the style applied to it. So we can actually see that, like, you know, when you have multiple lines of it, what's that line height going to be like? You know, what's it look like when you have, like, you know, that much text? I mean, because one word or a couple words isn't going to show that off very well. So I want the ability to be able to send in some lorem ipsum text or even some custom text. So you can see here I can actually customize the text I'm passing in, and that text gets into my style guide. So if I've got something that's like, you know, a date field or something, I can actually pass in a date, so I can see what a date looks like with that text treatment. If I've got like a, you know, attribution or a quote or something, I can actually put a quote in there so we can see what it looks like. Or I can just pass in the word lorem, and my mixin's automatically going to pass in just a chunk of, you know, hipster ipsum or whatever we decide to use. So let me show how that works. Very similar to colors. It just dives a little bit deeper, and it's got some each loops inside of my each loops. So we've got our map up here with headlines as one key, copy is the other key. And let's go ahead and jump down past our colors and look at extends. So extends, it's going to work in a very similar way. We're going to have an I value, which will start at 0, and we're just going to iterate through that as we go through each one of the ones in our extend. And here's my lorem value. So I can pass in whatever kind of lorem ipsum text I want to use, and you can put it in there. So if you like lots of kittens, you can do lots of kittens, and that's what's going to show up. So I'm going to do the same thing where I've got my site extends, and I've got extend groups, and I've got the actual extends inside of the extend group. So the div nth child, so the first one is going to extend that label, so it's kind of the black background and all that kind of stuff. And then it's going to have a pseudo element content of the extend group. So headline, copy, whatever you want to pass in as like that group of extends, you can pass into there. And then I'm going to iterate over the extends that's inside of it. So like my headers, where are you? Way up here. My headers have a list inside of that. So I'm going to iterate over that list. So let's look at that real quick. It's really similar to the colors. Here we go. So I'm going to iterate over the next portion of it. And I'm also going to check to see, is it a map that's inside of it? Because it's a map, I need to process it differently versus a list. So test to see if it's a map. If it's not a map, then we're just going to assume it's a list. So each extend and extends, we're going to up I by 1. So that's our div nth child of 1. Extends that text tree, or extend the header, and then put the content in. So just like the color, but we're just going to do it with some text. Otherwise, if it is a map, it's just a little more complex. We're going to extend whatever that key value is, so whatever the name of that text treatment is, and then we're going to, right here, okay. So then we're going to check to see if the value of it is lorem, like that little keyword I passed in. It'll just pass in that variable of lorem, the lorem text I put in with all the kittens. If it's not, it's actually just going to pass that value through, so whatever my custom text is. So it's smart enough to know, did I pass just a lorem keyword, or you can do a bunch of different keywords if you really want to. Otherwise, it's going to pass that straight on through. So what we get in the end is we get headlines on the right. That's our like the first key, and then we're going to extend main headline and secondary headline, and then it's going to go to the next key, which is copy, and it's going to go feature copy of kittens, and we're going to get a chance to see what it actually looks like with all the line height and all those types of things, and then our detailed copy down below it, and we'll get a chance to see what that all looks like. So the great advantage with this is that if you set up your HTML properly with like just a ton of divs, all these divs collapse. They don't actually have space to them. So I can copy, paste, 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 and they don't actually take up space on the page. So you can have like 50 of them, 100 of them, or something like that, and they're not actually going to make your page look horrible. So you can put plenty of them in there so that you're not going to have to go back and change it anytime in the future. And all you're going to be doing is iterating through these lists, using the nth child to apply all the styles. So this way, as you saw with this style guide, this is a physical page that's an actual HTML document within our project. So if somebody creates a feature branch, is making some changes and updating some colors and doing all those types of things, you can actually go to this page and see what those changes were. So if they updated some of the section headlines or changed one of the hero headlines, those changes are actually going to be reflected in this style guide, in that feature branch, testable, version controlled, and all that kind of stuff. So rather than having something separate that you have to maintain separately, creating this simple style guide is just going to constantly reflect whatever's in code. And you've got a nice little Sass mixin that's pretty smart enough to be able to give you some functionality to do cool stuff like Lord Mipsum text and that kind of stuff. So that's basically it. That's what I've been working on. Any questions about it? Yep. Yeah, if I've added spaces in there, yeah, they'd probably take up space or something. So yeah, as long as they're just completely empty. Yeah. And also, that's the other reason that I'm only giving padding to stuff that has nth child. I'm not just putting padding on all the divs. So only when it actually has something to assign to it, it gets content and it gets an extend and it gets padding and all those other styles that go to it. You can also take this idea and extend it to your icon font as well. So they've got a whole ton of icons. Exact same concept. I just have, I'm using font custom to compile my font. And when it does it, it also creates this big map of all my font names. And it just iterates through that big map and extends them all onto these divs. And I don't have to do anything. Anytime they update an icon, it's automatically going to show up here with the icon name and the actual icon and all that kind of stuff as well. So this gives you some good automation without having some like large like pattern lab kind of tool in the background that you have to manage and maintain as well. So I haven't, but that's certainly the next step of that or what was the one I tried? There's a lot of cool Sass tools where you can put documentation right into the partial in either JSON format or in a markdown format or something like that. And it automatically pulls that out and creates a style guide for you. That is a route that we considered going. It was, the only problem was we had gotten so far down the road that tacking that on would put a huge chunk of commented out text to the top of our partials, which they just weren't super keen about. So in this case, this doesn't impact your partials any more than just having a small map of all the names at the top of it. Yep. The main problem with this is that it's only for individual elements. In this case, I actually do have, I've got like this little list style here and a couple list items. These I've had to just do kind of manually because they do take some more manual markup to be able to apply those styles to. But they don't change very often. And it was something I was willing to just kind of sacrifice and live with. But yeah, being able to do something, I think doing, I really wish I remember the name of some of the projects. There's a lot out there. SassDoc is actually a recent one that Hugo just put out. There's a lot of them like that where you can even put that markup in a comment block at the top of your Sass partial, and that's the markup it uses to display. So that is a great tool if you want to go that deep, and it'll actually like compile it together for you, and it uses Node or something like that. So there are some great tools, and just depends on the project. In this case, this is something super lightweight that we could just tack on top of it with very, very minimal invasiveness and like very little maintenance as well. Anytime they update, anytime they tack on one more color to this big color list, it just automatically shows up there. So pretty easy to maintain. But yes, jumping into some of the more advanced ones where you can do stuff in the header of all your partials would be the next step, or moving to something like Pattern Lab would be probably the next step after that. So any other? Yep. You can do classes. I don't think you can do it extend. If it can, I'm going to update this. I thought I tried it and didn't work. You can programmatically extend things, but I don't think you can programmatically create something to extend, is what I'm saying. If you can? All right, I'm going to try that then, probably while you're sitting back here and the next people are talking. Because that would solve, it would basically mean that I can write my extends in a map and then have that map basically process it and create an extend out of that. And then it's all a one-step process. So I'm going to try that. But that's it. Any other, that was a good one. Any other questions? Think we're good? Cool. Jesse, you ready to pop up? Awesome. Thanks for listening to me for way too long. Oh, is there one other question? Probably outside the scope of this. Probably. Maybe we can talk about it after over another beer. All right.
Hello? Okay. that it's not showing me my notes on this side. So turn display mirroring off. There we go. All right. So I'm going to give a talk here that was inspired by a talk a couple of months ago and a question that Chris asked, which was, the talk was about using Grunt to have a build pipeline for your whole project. And Chris was like, well, how do we keep all these things installed and running on our machine when there's like 20 things I have to have installed to build my project? So I'm going to be talking about how to actually control that on a per project basis using some tools, specifically VirtualBox, Vagrant, and I work for Puppet Lab, so I have to plug Puppet. So yeah, the basic premise is your dev environments are getting fairly complicated. We've got CSS preprocessors, we've got build pipelines with Grunt and Gulp, template compilation, and you've still got your app servers, your database, everything that you have to run on your laptop just to get the thing loading so you can start doing your actual work. So we have these really complicated dev environments, and we also have the basic premise I'm going to talk about today is that consistency between all these environments is a really good thing, and divergence is a really bad thing. The divergence can take many different forms, and they all cause different problems, so that's fun. And divergence between the different environments also wastes a lot of time. Like, has anybody here ever gone to make a really simple change to an old project and discovered it doesn't run at all anymore? And you have to spend like 3 hours getting it working before you can change the one line you needed to change? Yeah, so that's wasting a lot of time. So the first kind of divergence I'm going to talk about is between developer environments. Now this can be between multiple members on your team, or it can be between yourself and yourself a year ago. Because you've updated some software, you reinstalled some things, your laptop got stolen, and you had to reinstall everything. So that is legacy projects. We also have 2 developers, and one of them has it working and says it works fine on my machine, and the other developer says, well, it doesn't work on my machine at all. We have new team members. How long does it take someone that's starting on your project to get to the point where they can actually do useful work? If they're a new full-time employee and it takes them a day to get started, that's maybe not that big of a deal. But if they're a contractor here for a week or 2, and you lose a day or 2 to them just getting set up. Yeah, see, that's a problem. You also have developers that like to have their own operating system. Like people like to work on Windows, I guess. People like to work on Linux. People like to work on Macs. People somewhere probably like to work on like Solaris or something too, I don't know. And then contractors, like I mentioned. So that's divergence between developer environments. You also have divergence between your development environment and your actual production environment. We're probably not all running whatever Linux server OS you're running in production on your laptop as well. This can cause hard to reproduce issues where it works fine on your laptop, but not on the server where it actually matters. You end up making changes into your production environment directly, which is never great. Sometimes you make those fixes on production and you forget to make them in your development environment, and the next time you deploy, they go away. And sometimes you make something you think will fix your production environment, and instead it crashes the whole site. You may just deploy something that doesn't work at all, because your development environment is different than your production environment. And then there's one more thing that's not really divergence related, but a lot of people kind of overlook. Has anyone here ever developed a Rails application on your local computer? Probably, yes. So you'll notice when you run Rails server, it sets up the server on an IP address that's 0.0.0.0.0. The 0.0.0.0 is every IPv4 interface on your computer. Localhost, the Wi-Fi at the coffee shop, your Ethernet connection, all of them. So that means If you have your laptop open right now and you've got a Rails app running on there, I could connect to it and look at it. So that's fine most of the time, but about a year ago, for example, there was a Rails vulnerability that allowed remote code execution. So now you're at the coffee shop and somebody can hack into your computer because you've got a Rails app running on there. Maybe not ideal. So we're going to talk about virtual machines. And there's a question mark up there because there are a few problems with just using virtual machines. First of all, how do we share these around? Virtual machines are like several hundred megabytes at least. Probably not something you want to check into your repo. And it's going to change like every time you do anything, which is also something you don't want to check into your repo. We still actually have a divergence problem with just a virtual machine because we can start with the same virtual machine, but a day later they're different. There is something called configuration management software that Puppet Labs makes that can help with some of these problems, but you still need some more help beyond that. So we're going to talk about Vagrant. So for the distribution problem, Vagrant has a concept of a base box, which is an image that you start with, and then it does things on top of. And there's a whole bunch of these base boxes at vagrantcloud.com. You can find pretty much any like Linux distribution that you want to start with on there. Somebody's already done it. There's a lot of people that have already installed some common software you might want, like PHP and Apache and MySQL and that sort of thing. So there's a good chance you can find something fairly close to what you need on there and then just make some tweaks on top of it. The divergence problem is mostly going to be managed by what Vagrant calls a provisioner, which Puppet is one of the options. You can also use Chef and a few other things. And the nice thing is we can kind of define what we want our server to look like in some fairly lightweight code and check that into version control. And then everybody gets the same thing. And then portability between platforms. Vagrant has providers, which are what actually provide the virtual machine that you're going to run on. And it has lots of things you can use as providers. VirtualBox is what we're going to talk about because it's free, but you can also use VMware, a bunch of other stuff that runs on your machine, and also use a bunch of stuff that runs in the cloud, like AWS or DigitalOcean or Azure or whatever. So how do we do this? Yes. Yes. I have never actually run one in the cloud yet, so I assume it works. I mean, the basic difference is that theoretically you can connect to that cloud one from multiple machines. You probably don't want multiple developers sharing the same one still, but maybe if you work at home sometimes and at the office sometimes, that would be useful if you don't have a laptop or something. Okay, so getting started. You're going to need at least 2 pieces of software. You're going to need VirtualBox and Vagrant. They're both free. You can download them right now. They are both run on a lot of different platforms, Mac, Windows, Linux. You need to create a Vagrant file, which you go into your project and you type Vagrant init once you have it installed, and we'll look at one of those in a minute. And then you need to choose a base box. Best choice for a base box is something that matches as closely as possible what your production environment is going to be. Sometimes you don't know that yet, so the second best choice is something you're comfortable with SSHing into, maybe, if such a thing exists. And then the setting up the provisioning is the second thing you're going to do. So anything that you need to have set up on the box beyond whatever your base box is going to fall into the realm of provisioning. There are lots of options, including not doing any provisioning at all. You can just install the base box and then SSH into it and do everything by hand. That's going to make it hard to share with your teammates, but if you're the only one working on it and you're just worried about being able to come back to it later, that may be enough for you. The most basic actual provisioning is shell provisioning, where it just runs commands that you tell it to run in a certain order. And we can see that a little later in the demo. You can also combine shell provisioning with something like configuration management to get your configuration management installed if it's not already on the base box. And then another interesting thing you can do is once you've got it all set up, you can actually repackage it as a box and then use that as your base box. So if there's no like developer specific stuff that needs to happen between different developers, like you can have one person who's kind of good at this stuff set everything up and then repackage it and then have everybody else use that as their base box, and then they don't have to worry about provisioning stuff. Oh, a note on that though, all the boxes, including the base boxes, are specific to the provider, so like you can't make one on VirtualBox and then use it on VMware. But in your Vagrant file, you can have it do different things depending on the provider, but we'll might see that. Okay, demo time. Back out of this. So this, a small caveat to the demo. I got to turn on mirroring again, I guess. A small caveat to the demo is that me and Mike, who's the developer of our puppetlabs.com website, have been working on this for like the last day, and it's not perfect yet, but it's enough to see. So this is what a Vagrant file looks like. Vagrant is written in Ruby, so it's going to look a lot like Ruby. Most of this you don't have to worry about. This part right here is the base box that I'm using. In this case, it's just a clean Ubuntu 1204 base box. Those come from that Vagrant Cloud website. You can also, I think, put in, like right here, a box URL to your own custom one if you don't want to put it on Vagrant Cloud. These are the ports that we're going to forward from the local machine to the virtual machine. So I want port 80 of the virtual machine to be port 8080 on my local machine, so that I can just type in localhost 8080 and it'll go to the virtual machine. We're also forwarding one for MySQL here. There's a bunch of networking configuration you can do that you don't usually have to worry about. You can do some customization to the actual virtual machine if you need to increase the CPU cores or the amount of memory it has. We're bumping the memory up to 2 gigs here. And you see here that we have 2 different things depending on whether you're using VirtualBox or VMware. And then, so here's the provisioning part. So we're doing one shell provisioning thing, which is a really long and complicated way to say that we're installing Puppet. And then we're telling it a little bit about Puppet. We're telling it we have a Puppet manifest. And if you guys don't know anything about Puppet, don't worry. We're telling it we have a Puppet manifest and where it is, basically. 10-second synopsis of Puppet is that it's a domain-specific language for defining server configuration. So it's a file like this where I can say, hey, I want to have the Compass gem installed, and I want to have Grunt CLI installed, and all this stuff. I want to have a MySQL server set up. And Puppet knows how to do this on the server. So you tell it what you want the server to look like using this syntax, and then it goes out and does it. So, right. Every time Puppet runs, it reinforces that state. So if something has changed, if the Apache configuration is different than it expects, it will fix it. It will put it back to how it's supposed to be. So that can be good if you accidentally change something. It can be bad if you intentionally change something and don't realize the Puppet is going to change it back for you. The thing with Vagrant is that by default, it only provisions your box once. Normally, in like a real server environment, Puppet is running like every 30 minutes to maintain the state of the server. In this environment, it runs once when you first run Vagrant up, and then it will only run again if you specifically tell it to. So let's look at what that looks like. So this, all I've done here is I have cloned the repo that has the puppetlabs.com website, and I've checked out the branch that has the Vagrant stuff we've been working on. And I'm going to type, and hope this works, Vagrant up. And it didn't work. Yes, wrong provider. So it defaults to VMware on my machine. So I should tell it to use VirtualBox. So it's going to, I've already downloaded this box, so it knows that, and it's just going to import it. It doesn't have to download it again. Then it's going to boot the virtual machine, and then it's going to run the provisioner. This will take a little bit of time. And there is one thing with our Puppet manifest that doesn't quite work. We have to run it twice before it starts working, which is sadly not a super uncommon Puppet thing. This is kind of an interesting plugin. I don't know how much anybody knows about VirtualBox, but there are some things that VirtualBox likes to have on the virtual machine to help the OS work well with VirtualBox that are called guest editions. And it has noticed that my version of VirtualBox is 4.3.12, and the ones that were installed on that base box are older than that, so it is updating them. And that is a plugin for Vagrant that you can get that does that automatically, which is pretty cool. If the guest editions are too far out of date, weird things can happen. Okay. There is some red output in this. So that all that stuff was that shell provisioner was doing apt-get update. It was adding an apt repo. It was running apt-get update. It was installing Puppet, and now Puppet is actually running. And so we'll see things like package memcached changed from purge to latest. That means it just installed memcache on the server. And it's doing some other stuff here. And there's going to be a little bit more red. I wasn't sure whether to start this at the beginning and then go through the rest of the talk, or if it would be interesting to watch it. No, so that's what I was saying. The provisioning only happens the first time unless you specifically tell it. Like if we decided, hey, we need some other software on our virtual machines, we would update the Puppet manifest to install that, and then we would run Vagrant provision, which would run this again. But most of the time, when you say Vagrant up, all it has to do is boot the virtual machine, which takes, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds. Anybody else have questions? This would be a good time while it's running this. Yeah, the shell provisioning, like Puppet is smart enough to know what needs to be done and what's already been done. Shell provisioning, it will always run those commands. So you may have to write into your shell commands, if this file doesn't exist, do it. Scott. Yes, you probably, that commented out like advanced networking section that I skipped past in the Vagrant file. You can, like in VirtualBox, you could have them all be on the same virtual network. And so you would just have to do a little bit more network configuration. That only maps to your local machine. So yeah, you'd have to do some complicated SSH tunneling probably to accomplish that otherwise. All right, so it's made a MySQL database. It's copying the settings file. There was another question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are about the boxes that are available. A little bit I mean, it's like you were talking security was one of your points earlier. I don't know. I'm just curious, is there anything going on there with safeguard wire?
You could certainly be careful of whose boxes you pick from. Like there are, I think we publish specific, like Puppet Labs publishes boxes that have Puppet pre-installed. So there are like namespaces on that Vagrant Cloud website that are more trustworthy probably than others. This is the other red I was talking about. So For some reason, after it installs Node and then it tries to run grunt build, like it doesn't see Node the first time, but if I run it again, it will see Node. So we're still working on that. Yeah, the nice thing about a virtual machine is we're controlling what like ports are mapped, and other than that, the virtual machine, the kind of the point is it doesn't have much access to the host operating system. In this case, there is a magical, I should probably mention that. The way this whole thing works is that the folder that you run this in is magically shared between your local machine and the virtual machine. See, ran fine that time. Well, there was still some red, but those are warnings mostly. So this folder here, this massive folder of stuff, is Vagrant SSH is a way to SSH in without typing in a password or anything, is the same on the virtual machine as this /vagrant folder. And if I change something on the virtual machine in this vagrant folder, it's changed on my local machine. If I change it on a local machine, it's changed on the virtual machine. This uses VirtualBox shared folders, which perform pretty well. You can also do it with like NFS and stuff, which performs better, but NFS, like if you have grunt watch going on the virtual machine, NFS doesn't trigger that, so there are drawbacks to all the approaches. So this is running now. I should be able to go. We also had a little trouble with this too, but I should be able to go to localhost 8080. Did I actually type it? Takes a little while the first time.
How's this work with things like live reload and that kind of stuff?
I have not used it with live reload yet.
Browser would have to watch kind of, yeah.
Here we go.
That's pretty. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So if
live reload that might put it.
yeah, so you probably run live reload on your machine, watching the folder, and just have it reload, but it would reload from the virtual machine.
Sure, I guess I could still watch it locally. Yeah, no.
That's the magic of the shared folder.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this is the publiclabs.com website. I'm ready to start making changes. If that was my job. All right, so let's go. There were just a couple other things. I'm basically done here. This is a big question. Part of the reason that Chris was complaining about this is because he doesn't want to be a sysadmin, and you still kind of have to be a sysadmin to do this. The nice thing is, if there is one person on your team that's okay at this stuff, you can push it all off onto them. And then everybody else gets the benefit of their work, instead of them having to go around to everybody's desk and fix their computer. Performance is a question. It is not going to be quite as fast as running it locally, probably, purely locally. That first page load was really slow, but I think other page loads are more reasonable. I don't know, I haven't run this on my laptop a lot. Yeah, so that's not horrible. Yeah, and we have not done like any tuning. We're like, this is kind of slow. We should look into it, and we haven't done any of that. So yes, so there's all kinds of things we could do to make it better. So we talked about performance. Oops, went too far. You get to see the sparkles again. Okay. That magical shared folder is magical, and it's also a little confusing. Like, if I go into that shared folder and do chmod 777 on a folder, nothing happens. So there are some weird things like there. The best solution to that particular problem, if you have like Drupal that needs to be able to write to folders in your project, is to just run Apache as the Vagrant user, because the Vagrant user is the one that owns that Vagrant folder. So that works pretty well. But there are some other little things you'll run into, but the good thing is other people will probably run into it, and Google will solve your problems. So that's it. Any other questions? There may be. I have not looked at the easiest solution was to just run Apache as the Vagrant user. But there may be other ways around. In fact, I know the article I read to solve that problem from Google had like 3 other proposed solutions. This was just the simplest one. So. Any other questions?
How did you land that URL?
I literally had to mail a paper check to Trinidad and Tobago to register that domain. When I had to renew it, they had joined the 20th century and it could process credit cards. But the first time I registered it, I had to mail them a check. All right.
Well, hey, we are on. While Chris gets set up, every month we like to take an opportunity to give companies and people that represent companies an opportunity to tell if they are hiring open positions and whatnot, or just general openings. So is anyone here from a company that has open positions and is looking to hire? As I know we have people that are currently looking for jobs in this area. And it makes me run all the way back.
Hi there, my name is Alan White, and I work for HealthSpark. I see a lot of familiar faces here. So if you go to our website, which is horrible and actually repels like cool people and developers and seems to only attract certain salespeople. You didn't hear that? Oh, it's on the internet. Hey. Yeah, but we're going to rebuild that. See, we're hiring smart people. Honestly, I've been there 9 months and I love it. There's some really smart people, and we're solving some really hard problems in healthcare. So if you're interested, go to healthspark.com, and that's HealthSparq.com, and there is a jobs page somewhere in there. If you can find it, good luck. But I promise you, there is a long list of developer-oriented jobs there, and it's a cool place. Or just talk to me.
Anyone else? Quiet. Oh, no, we do have a couple. Okay.
So currently I work for Thetis, and currently Thetis Corporation is looking to hire. So you guys can check out it's THETUS.com. I don't remember. I don't remember which position. I know they've got a UX position open. Okay, they still have a web developer position. Yeah, THETUS.com.
Thetis. THETUS. We'll have to tweet that one out. Great. Was there anyone else? Did I miss anyone? Yeah. Oh, there's a big list of openings at Puppet, apparently, for marketing, sales, internships, IT, financial, customer service. Yeah, pretty much. They need them all. Well, you've got that on. Is it turned on yet? Hey, they got a green light.
There we go. Phase 2, who I work for. You can see us right up there, phase2technology.com. We're looking for devs. So if you like to code, front end, back end, whatever you choose, we're kind of also the whole, if you've got a heartbeat and like to code. So yeah, we're looking for exciting projects, and I'm gonna kind of talk about something that we bumped into while we were looking into something that Micah was talking about, style guides. So my name is Chris Bloom, and I'm a front-end developer at Phase 2. And we like to look at frameworks. I really, really like frameworks. And Google just put out a new, I guess, kit, framework, starter, whatever you want to call it, a Kickstarter, that Yeah, they're really trying to promote as sort of a good foundation starting point for web development. It's really cool. It's only been out for a couple of weeks. So this might be like the first time any of you have heard of it if you're not like glued to Reddit all day long like I am. But I really like things like Foundation. I love my Bootstraps. I love Ionic, right, which is another good one out there. I like getting into these things because they sort of do my job for me. They tell me how to be better. Whole bunch of people who are way smarter than me got together and committed code and made these things really great. And I get to go read it and steal it and look really, really smart. I love my my foundations. I love my frameworks. So I also teach as well, and being able to provide a nice container for my students to work in and say, here you go, here's a bunch of code, start writing is great, right? We don't have to play this game of okay, let's open up Notepad from scratch and everybody start typing. I like giving good starting points that have really good best practices. I also like just playing around with new stuff. Half the reason we do what we do is because, yeah, we get to play around with new toys and tools like every week, which is, yeah, a whole lot of fun. So Google launched this site, and if anyone wants to follow along, check this out. If you've never been here, it's really, really worth it because they basically said a lot of the sites that are out there are crap. They're crap now, and they were really crap when they were first written in like 2002 and then never updated. So they put out a big how-to internet, basically, right? How to go build multi-device, and this is something they're really, really trying to pound into people's heads, is that there is no mobile site. There is no desktop site. There is just sites that work beautifully across multi-site. So it's a lot of guides and tutorials and tools and downloads and lots of goodies, okay, to just get going. Just dive right in and start writing some code and start making some HTML. They do they give you a really, really great set of tools. They really put a lot of value on optimizing performance, accessing the native pieces and the native interfaces on phones right out of the box, right? Normally we're taught like, oh, that's the advanced part of web development. I think we've moved past that now. I think the new sort of era of web dev is this is just what it is, right? We all have phones. It's not that hard. Why aren't we like taking advantage of this stuff right away? And so from the very beginning, like web 101, my grandma could sit down and start doing their tutorials and be messing with like the gyroscope on the phone right out of the box. So we're just going to go through some of the basic pieces of this, just a quick little tutorial. I mean, anyone can just go read the site and see exactly what I'm going to tell you about. We're just going to demo some of the commands. But yeah, I really want to know what is this? It's not actually a framework. It's just kind of something we might all be familiar from the past. Who here's used HTML5 Bootstrap from back in the day, right? Like, ever had to sit down and someone's like, all right, I need a HTML file, and you're like, shit, I haven't written one of those in a really long time. Like, I use Drupal or I use something else, or I've got, someone else does the heavy lifting for me when it comes to HTML files. So I always used to turn to HTML5 boilerplate because I don't remember what goes in the head of a document usually. So this is essentially like HTML5 boilerplate reborn, okay? Google said, this is great. We're going to do it better. We're going to give you a bunch of tools. And then we're actually going to steal some of their CSS, which is funny. I found that out. Well, we'll take a look at that. So, okay, diving into this. So this is really directed at new people new to development. So there's a lot of us in here that have been doing this for a while. We're kind of, we're a little jaded. This is great if you're new to like the Devi side. Who considers themselves a relatively new web dev or relatively inexperienced? Looking at you, Nam. Put your hands up. There you go. All right. So it used to be the moment you started to teach someone how to do web development and you said, okay, pull up a terminal, you lost them. They were gone. They're just like, screw this. I ain't here for command line, right? That's like, do your own thing. This is something we've got to get over. I believe that the days of I'm going to open Notepad and start writing are gone. We don't get to do that anymore. There are these really amazing tools that allow us to build really great experiences, but we've got to get used to this concept of tooling. Everything here tonight, has actually been about tooling, literally your stuff with Sass and all of like the crazy extrapolations, right? It's about tooling. Vagrant is perfect example. Puppet is the perfect example of a tool chain that is ridiculous before I can see cats on the internet, right? Like it's just this huge pile of stuff. So tooling is a part of this, and I love this because when Google goes and says, we're going to teach you how to write HTML, the first thing they start with is, here's gulp, and we're going to learn gulp, all right? So let's do it. Also, some really basic architecture. We're going to go over the architecture of the project. It's a really great best practices of how you would go ahead and work a simple HTML project. So if you showed people this list of tools required to get started to write some HTML 18 months ago, they would have told you you were crazy. This is insane. I need Git, Node, Ruby, a Sass gem, and gulp. All of those things. That's crazy, right? It's like 3 commands. Come on. Like you can run 3 commands and get these. Everyone should have Git. Comes native in OS 10. Node is just a homebrew command away. If anyone hasn't played around with homebrew, it's super simple. Ruby comes native in OS 10. You got it already. Yeah, Mac Master Race. All right, what up? All right. So Sass is just a gem install Sass. You're good to go. And gulp is the only one. This is the hard one. And the hard one, and by I mean you got to type a few more letters, you just npm install. Once you get Node, you get npm, you install gulp. Okay? Gulp is a terribly named tool. Compares with something called Grunt, which is terrible as well. I don't know what it is with the names of these tools, but basically, we do a lot of really repetitive tasks as web developers. And these things help us do a lot of really boring stuff over and over and over again, automate a lot of our workflow. Gulp just happens to be the new flavor of the month that's faster and cleaner, and apparently Google certified now, so they're throwing their weight behind it. So, okay, something that's really interesting to note here, and this is for the new folks, those of us that have been in it for a while are probably used to this. What's npm install do? Who knows? That guy in the back. Why doesn't my project just come with all the dependencies to begin with? Right? So it used to be, I want to give you my code. I would give you like everything, all my libraries, all my jQuery plugins, all my other tools that I might need. And now basically we get to give you just the skeleton, just the pieces that I wrote, and you run a command and it just pulls in all that other stuff from around. It's analogous to what we did in Vagrant, right? You say, hey, Vagrant, go get me all of these packages, pull them from the internet and keep me up to date, and I don't have to bloat my deliverable with all those things. So, okay, so long story short, don't resist the web tool chain, and let's see what we get right out of the box. So right away, I think you can see it over here. Sorry, my project helper is very, very small on the side here in PHP Storm. But we get some really, really cool Node modules right out of the box, okay? So all of these come right down. You'll notice things like browser sync, you get auto prefixers, minifies, uglifies, and probably one of my favorites, JS hint. So just by downloading this, you don't do anything else. You run the gulp command to get your project started, and you start writing code, and it yells at you as you screw up, all right? It makes your CSS better. It launches and compiles your Sass for you, and you didn't do anything. You're not configuring anything. You're not fighting with gems. You're not fighting with server whatevers and who's its. You just start writing, and it takes care of the rest for us. It's really, really great. Browser sync is a big deal. This was one of the main things, one of the main questions that came up with the Vagrant stuff is, I want to write my stuff. I don't want to look in a window. I want my window just to keep updating. We had this in Dreamweaver 3 in 1997, right? Why don't I get this now in 2014? Well, we finally do. Like, we've made it, guys. We have real-time reloading, and we don't have to necessarily set up a big complex server. So check it out. Okay, so they just give you some basic HTML, okay? And the HTML file is beautiful. It's perfect. It's got all of like the pieces that you forget to include. It's got a robots file. No one remembers to do robots, right? It's got good meta tags, good headers, and we can kind of get into that just a little bit. I mean, it's not too sexy to look at, but you know, look at this, right? When was the last time you included meta mobile web app capable? Who can tell me what that thing does? That dude in the back. Damn straight, right? Like, it's a website. Like, why can't I just make it an app on my phone? And this gives us the ability to be like, boop, put it on my home screen, and then you can just click it and go right to a website, which is awesome. Even this, I love this. Windows 8 support for tiles built right in. This is apparently a standard. Who knew? I didn't. So there it is, right? Super, super cool. A bunch of these header things that we would never really remember. Of course, the viewport specific stuff that we all need for responsive mobile, and nobody writes the string correctly because there's 6 different ways to write it, okay? What does this do? Not the dude in the back, somebody else over here. Come on, we're all web developers here. Dan, what's it do? So, fun fact, most clients, sometimes they expect their desktop on a mobile website to be zoomed out. And if you set this, they can never have that ever, but they once had it in the 90s or the early 2000s, and they really, really want it again. But as soon as you put this in, you can no longer zoom your web page out and see your web page from like a 10,000-foot view. You're stuck with the mobile version. So it's like this sort of like Sophie's choice. Like, do you get the mobile website, or do you get the desktop zoomed completely out, right? A lot of time, a lot of tiers here. But do this, right? This says we're embracing mobile devices, we're moving forward, and it's in the right position in the header, which I never do correctly, which is pretty cool. So I went with the more complex index version. They have another one called Basic, which is just a lot, really, really stripped down. So, okay, so we're new, we're getting started into web dev, we've got an index file, we've got a bunch of these tools. Then what does Google tell us to do? Now, all of these things, by the way, I really want to point out, I'm just running through their Get Started guide. Okay, this is all sitting right up in their documentation under, let's go to like tools. Here we go. Setting up your environment and building. All of these things are just listed here. We're just kind of picking out the good parts. So really easy, really accessible. As soon as we run npm install from the prior slides, we end up with this dist folder and this node modules folder, okay? Sorry, when we run gulp. So I'm going to fake it. I've already run it, but if I come over here to my terminal and I just run gulp, which is just terrible. God, I hate that name. All right, and we gulp, it's going to start compressing and rendering and updating and looking and hurting my feelings because I write terrible JavaScript. It's going to yell at me. It says, okay, we did all of these things. Your site's been rendered. Okay, great. Now what? Why don't we just fire up the server that comes with it? Who needs a Vagrant box? Psh, Puppet, right? So if we gulp serve, oh, I've got some internets. There it is. There's my site. Now, this fires up at localhost 3000, okay? So this is Node running a small little web server that just watches what I'm doing and updates it over here. So if I come over here, I say things like, oh, hello, I like cats. Boop, there it is, right? Updated in real time. That was so fast. That was amazing. I don't need PHP. Hello. I just do this all day long. Trust me, we didn't have this like 2 years ago, and I could just delete. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so if we go back, whoops, just killed my presentation. So if we go, we're running our server, and this is something really, really fun. I'm kind of jumping the gun here a little bit, but I really want to show you this. You'll notice that my server, when I ran gulp serve, I also ended up with this IP address. Who's got a phone on them or a laptop? Who wants to totally wreck my site? Let me pull that back up. Hey, you're serving right off my computer right now. Now, fun fact, keep it open. Don't touch it. Hang on. Don't touch it. Are you ready for this? Oh, where'd it go? Hang on. Sorry, guys. OK, refresh. Everyone refresh really quick. I want to see if this works. Did it move on your phones? OK, here, watch this, watch this. Hang on. Bear with me. They really, really want you doing multi-device coding. Whoever's doing that, keep doing it. Right? You're screwing with my phone now. You are now the master, OK? So let's pretend you've got a table full of iPads, you know, and the minis and the retinas and the phones and the, whoop, I don't know, where are we going? Are you actually, whoa, how did we do that? Good job, guys. You click the link, got it, got it. So I'm just going to keep that going the rest of the presentation. So now you're doing real multi-device development, and you didn't do anything. You ran one command, right? Which is rad. I just see like 9 people fighting over the server right now. You just keep doing your thing. All right, we'll come back to that. Also, built into the Gulp serve as part of all of this, Google is big on page speed. Because the faster your site is, the faster they can parse it, the faster they can get data out of it, and it makes their job easier. So it's in their best interest to give us all the tools we need to figure out just like how shitty our code is, right? So you run Gulp page speed, and you get a real report of your code, the quality, what Google thinks it's about, basically. Super cool. Nothing else you need to do. You just run the thing, and you get a report. OK, yeah, this is the one. I jumped the gun on it. But yeah, like we get real honest debugging. So this makes testing a lot easier. I've actually built sites before, and I've had 5 devices in front of me, and I've written some code, and then I've gone refresh, 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 right? It's a really terrible, terrible night. So, OK, so this is the Sass meetup. Let's talk about how they do Sass. And admittedly, their Sass is a little disappointing. I'm big in strict methodology to building and handling Sass. I like SMAX and BEM. Those are just one approach to structuring your files, and BEM is an approach to structuring and naming your elements inside of HTML, okay? So yeah, we get compiling. Like, it's no big deal. So if I want to come over here, see how bad you guys are messing this up right now. If I want to write a little bit of code, so let's play with components.sass. And if I want to go and set my body, yeah, hang on. Boom. So I just deleted it. This is why we can't have nice things, all right? No, I don't get it, nobody gets it, all right? So we just compiled some Sass instantaneously, and I'm using these preprocessors, and I'm not fighting with Ruby. I'm not doing compass compile. I'm not sitting in like a separate terminal tab while we're playing with it. It all just built right into the server, okay? And it's back. So so what is interesting is if we get into the index file that they give us, they actually include 3 CSS files. And this isn't really to rag on them. They actually stole the HTML5 boilerplate CSS directly and included it. Then also included this general components file, because this is how we're writing code these days, right? Our styles. We want components. We want tight widgets that are self-contained, that can behave any way they want wherever we place them. We don't start at the top of pages and style to the bottom anymore. Micah's example was perfect. We want a style guide. I want to see how every little thing interacts. And they do that too. They have a really great components folder. It's split up into all the little pieces. If you click the style guide example from the rendered output, you see all of these individual components. What is really neat here is that this is wrapped in a really specific tag called build CSS. This lines up with Gulp. Gulp basically goes, parses these strings, smashes all the CSS together, strips out the white space and compresses it, and then replaces this when we go and build our distribution folder. Really common workflow. Yo. That's the first thing I looked for, actually. They are using a stripped out version of the HTML5 boilerplate for like, so like normalize does this, let's get everyone roughly to the same behavior. And then HTML5 boilerplate says, I have some strong opinions about how something should work, okay? So we've got these like layers and layers, layers. And by the time we're writing code, like it should be in a pretty good spot. So they are including, and if you look inside of components, what do you see here? Nothing, because my font's so small. But this is actually normalize.scss right here, okay? So if we go in and we zoom, there it is. All right, so we get everything kind of included kitchen sink style. Yep. So I actually have only played with Ionic just exactly like this. Hey, this looks like fun and it's shiny, and I want to like, oh look, I got a hello world, and then like I got to get back to my job. But like, I don't know. I don't know what Ionic is doing. I do know that we moved away hard from that hard reset, right? Eric Meyer's reset.css basically, right? Yeah, where. That's interesting, and that sounds like them because they really just want to do their own thing, and and all of their stuff's really, really good, right? I like normalize because, well, I like it and I hate it. I like it as like a purist, as like a web developer. I hate it because when my clients see it, things will look different in Internet Explorer as they do in Chrome, because they should, right? What normalize does is it doesn't get everybody looking the same. It gets everyone to the place they should roughly be by default browsers, right? What reset did with Eric Meyers was it just said, you know, we all play with the same, we're resetting everything back to 1 and then starting from there and then building up. So I would love to see Ionic's approach to it. I actually would love more opportunities to play with Ionic because I love Angular and I don't want to be writing PHP anymore. So you gotta, yeah. I mean, every time I've included normalize in a project, it does almost what I need, and then I need to write another 50 lines to get it to some like standard behavior, right? Yeah, exactly. So this is cool because up here in our include in index.html, so gulp grabs all of these files, we compile it. So you're working and it's compiling, and then you literally say gulp, distribute this for me. Let's render this, let's get this thing live. And it smashes all of these things, and your final resulting index file. This is cool. This is a really cool comparison. Looks like this. What's going on here? This is every bit of white space stripped out of it. But if we go to where the actual, let's call it main.css.css. There it is. Just to kind of keep this short, it rips all of these things down into a single file for us, right? And we didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting. So we have a workflow where we can develop and we keep all of our stuff separated so we can debug really easy, and then we can compile and get a real distribution. Cool. And lots of cool googly bits in the utils.scss. There's a little bit of extendable stuff similar to Micah's work in there. There's a really great simple grid, like grid for noobs, and I love it. It's like you get 6 columns. That's it. Like you don't get like crazy, I want different counts or I want wrappers or extendables. They're like, no, here's your 6 columns. Get all your shit in the 6 columns, and they're going to do this thing for you. It looks just like this. If your site doesn't fit this behavior, big thing in the upper left, slightly bigger, smaller thing in the upper right, and then the thing over there and the thing over there. When we go mobile, it goes boop, and then does this. You're SOL. You get to go rewrite this the way you want by playing with the Sass, but out of the box, they're like, here's a real simple grid. Those of you that are new to the internet, go ahead and play with it, and welcome to responsive web design. Cool. Just a little bit of confusion if people are going to dive into this and take a look. Google felt the need to use both the word components and modules in the same thing. I've been using them interchangeably, and it's really confusing. So essentially, I think the rule that they're using is modules are really specific things to your site that are design considerations for your design. So your headers, you've got things like an article, like these really like specific things for your web design. And components, they're treating as stuff every website has. So like links, breadcrumbs, tables. What do we do when we've got images and video and stuff like that? So a really, really generic approach to components. Terrible words, because modules and components mean the same thing in my head, and they could have picked a better word for that. But yeah, so something just to watch out for. Yeah, let's take a look. Do you want to look at a component or do you want to look at a module? Okay, let's do link. There it is, right? Super, yeah, super, super generic. Let's look at media. There it is, right? So all of the variables, all the goodies, all of like the definable mixins sit inside of utils. Okay, just a whole bunch of things. There they are, okay? And lots of little helpers down on the bottom. So you can say, I'm gonna write some code, I want it to apply to only medium up media queries or only large up media queries because we are mobile first responsive, which means we start at 0 and we work our way up when it comes to media queries. Okay, so just kind of an overview, all of the goodies we get out of the box. It is mobile first, we get that viewport meta actually written correctly. Some fun icons, and a real simple example of how to do icons in there. The make this thing an app on my phone button meta tag, which is awesome. All of the scripts are pushed to the footer, and they are not loaded on doc ready, right? They are loaded in the footer instead, right? Big debate there on which one's better. Have fun, not my job. Okay, so 6-column grid and some media queries to find like really good, safe media queries right where they should be. So like 600 up is right after mobile, right after small. Okay, and I think that's it. I end all my presentations with a picture of my cats. So you're shaking your head. Okay, yeah, and that's it. Any questions? Got it? Looks good? All right, welcome to Google Web Starter Kit, guys. Yes? Thing that you're doing. Oh yeah. So yeah, this is really for that person who's like, hey, I'm new to the web and I want something really simple that does all of this heavy lifting for me. I just want to make a little thing. Yeah. Exactly, right? And I need help with best practices because I'm just terrible and I don't remember any of these things. And the more somebody can do them for me, and even better, just to go teach them to begin with, like all of those functions didn't exist 2.5 years ago, and that's just how we're supposed to do it now. So having somebody else do them for me is awesome. No, so at the end of the day, this is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? That's the whole goal here. So all of us come from like dynamic CMS, Node-y, server-y world, PHP, right? This is totally for just getting some static assets built and up onto some kind of static hosting. And being able to say like, okay, so there's like gulp serve, and then there's gulp distribute, name of the place you've defined in your gulp file, and it's just like, and that could be Git, that could be FTP, it could be copying a file to like a map, whatever. You just tell gulp what to do and give it an index, and now you get to name your deployment schemes basically, and it's awesome. because there's a node module to do this, right, already, which is awesome. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jesse. So I'm pretty sure next month, Alan, the coworker of yours, right? I believe is up for next month. What's his name again? No. I think I remember like it was tooling as well, like the tools that you used. Um, what were some of the tools that you were using when we showed those off? Yeah, should just be able to hold the power button down, or I'll just hand it to you. Give us a preview. Sell it.
No. Okay. Your question was what tools are we using? Yeah. Yeah, I should. Well, okay. So, we are using a lot of open source stuff. A lot of these things that we've been talking about are familiar to us as far as our front end developers. What we have though is like we purchased a company this last January, and they did things very differently. And we have some of our designers are not coders. We have some UX oriented people that are really great at helping us figure out the flow of things, but they're not programmers. So and that's honestly like we need those people. And I'm kind of on the fence. I'm half of one, and I'm half visual and half I'm a dabbler, basically. So anyway, some of the tools that we use, we're building a pattern library. That's my primary responsibility, which is one reason I was really interested in your presentations tonight. So thanks, guys. It's nice to see this concept going. And Micah, yours was really, really unique. I had not seen anything like that. But that's just getting started. And we're kind of really, the hard part is just using it as a way to build consensus. That's a real challenge, I think, and kind of it requires working together, and it's not about the best technology, it's about how to work together as a team with all of our unique strengths and weaknesses and things like that to achieve a goal. One tool that I'm going to present on tomorrow at my company in-house, and I probably won't share it publicly because it shows, kind of our internal designs, but I'm going to have a little fun with it. We've been using InVision for a little while, which is really a great tool for visual designers. Like even if you're not a designer and you want to prototype something and throw some sketches into it, it's what I call the screeny linker. There's a category of apps that seem to be the screeny linkers, where you throw a bunch of pictures in there and then you can draw hotspots and link them together. That's gotten a lot of traction internally. It lets us also do just live discussions and things like that. So tomorrow I think I'm going to have the guys come in remotely and basically humiliate me in front of the crowd with this design just to get some laughs. So that tool we've been using, we're using Jira for agile stuff. We just moved off of Trello because it just wasn't really working well enough for our agile team. But the thing that we've tried to work on, I'm rehearsing for next month. One of the things that I've tried to help our team do is sort of like, and I think our company has a really good ethos of doing this, is that sort of like, hey, you bring your own tools and processes, and that's cool. As long as we find like the points where we need consensus, like for example, InVision's cool. You just need a picture. It can be a screenshot, it can be a scribble, it can be from a Photoshop document, Illustrator. I've been actually taking screenshots of the pattern library that I'm building and some of our layouts because it works, and throwing that in there. So like, hey, it doesn't really matter if you like Photoshop, that's okay. There's a place for you. If you want to do your designs with code like me, there's a place for you too to talk about that. So trying to find that line that sort of honors individuals, workflows and tastes and tools, because there's so many. I mean, really, has it ever been this good? I mean, the hard part is picking the tools, and finding ones that like you can get others to agree on. So I don't know. There's some stuff Rian would love to share, I think, about our design process from his point of view, sort of managing it from the 10,000 10,000-foot view. I'm really interested to hear what he has to say on that. So come next month. Yep.
And what is that, the 9th or 10th, or so we know that date? Nothing matters. It's second Thursday. 10th. So August, right, it's July, August 10th. Bloom.
Actually totally forgot to announce this when I was up there. I was recently introduced to an organization called Chick Tech, which helps get young women and high school young women involved in technology early. In August, they're doing a 2-day event where basically there's going to be about 85 85 high school girls who really are going to have their first experience maybe playing around with a lot of this technology and development. They're going to have tracks for, let's see here, 3D printing, write your own computer game, microcontrollers, robotics, writing your own smartphone apps, UX and design, which is like amazing that that's actually a thing. They're actually teaching high school students now. And website design and creation, very specifically to what we do. Now, it might be in Drupal, right? Because that's the people that volunteered to teach the 2-day class, but they're looking for more volunteers and they're looking for donations. chicktech.org in Corvallis in August. So check it out, Chick Tech. This is a really big deal in technology right now, and that's women participation in tech. Go join any of those Twitter fights right now. They're amazing, right? Huge flame wars over this. Nobody can deny that like it's an issue, right? And this is one of the few groups that's actually, I think, doing it right. It's true, right? Yeah, the Twitter fights are amazing. So this is cool. It's awesome. It wasn't a thing until really, really recently. I think people are finally realizing this. So chicktech.org, Corvallis. CHICK Tech, TECH.org. Chick Tech, normal spelling. Yep, cool. Thanks.
You need to yell at him or later? All right. All right, we're good. All right, so next month, August 10th, you can beat Bloom over the head for any sexist comments he might have just made that he was not aware of. And again, thanks for coming. If there's any pizza, finish that off. If there's any beer, finish all of that off. It needs to be gone. Just kidding. But thanks.